Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Vision Chats Plus. Today, our topic is going to be the future of experiential learning and student employment. Before we get started, I would like to extend a sincere welcome and thank you to our distinguished panelists. Thank you for being here. I'll do a little bit of a more informal introduction here momentarily, but I also want to reach out and thank all of our audience members for being here. You took an hour out of your, what I'm sure is very busy schedules to be here with us, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you're here. A couple housekeeping items I'd like to go over first and foremost. Vision chats are designed to be very informal conversations. They're not scripted. None of the panelists have talked about questions beforehand. The idea is that we are four colleagues sitting around a table talking about very important conversations as it relates to higher education, having a cup of coffee. So that's really kind of the premise of this conversation. And number two, what I would say to our audience members that are tuning in, please feel free to add questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas to the questions or comments section. We will be monitoring that during this conversation, and I will certainly do my best to incorporate those questions or comments into the conversation as we move forward here today. So with that being said, I'm going to do some very brief introductions. My name is Nickolas Lantz. I serve as the Executive Director of University Experiential Learning here at Johns Hopkins University. And I also serve on the board of directors of the National Student Employment Association. With us, we also have Charlisa Edelin, who is the co-director of Delaware State University's Law Studies program, and she is the chairwoman for DSU's Mass Communications, Visual, and Performing Arts Department. Additionally, Dr. Edelin serves as one of the 5 elected members of the Appoquinimink School District Board of Education. Welcome, Char.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. Next, we have Marianna Savoca. She is the Assistant Vice President for Career Development and Experiential Learning at Stony Brook University. Dr. Savoca is also a published author and recently elected President of the National Society of Experiential Education. Thank you so much, Marianna, for being here.
Super happy to be here. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Ian Sladen. He is the Vice President of Cooperative Education and Career Development at Drexel University. Prior to this role, Ian served as the Assistant Dean and co-founder of Drexel's Charles D. Close School of Entrepreneurship. Ian, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Sure. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. I think a good place to start would be this concept of what we call things. And so what I would like to do is just kind of give a couple examples of what I'm talking about, and then I'd love to open this up to just free conversation and comments. So when I first started at Hopkins, I started as the Director of Student Employment Services. And what we would have happen is at the beginning of each semester, we would have orientation events. Mm-hmm. And one of these orientation events was, leaders of departments such as myself and other departments on campus would meet kind of informally in a networking event for parents and guardians of freshman students that were coming into Hopkins. And these are very informal, just having conversations, answering questions. I would answer general questions about Hopkins, but then I would also answer questions specific to the department in which I represent, Student Employment Services. And what I found that happened, I'm not going to say all the time, but frequently, more than it should, is as soon as I introduced myself as Director of Student Employment Services, that interest level dropped immediately. That's it. And it was hard for me to understand. And a lot of times the response that I would get was, hey, I appreciate that. I want my students to focus on their academics. I don't want them to be burdened with working and earning money. And now I can't help but think, rewind the hands of time, if I would introduce myself as the Director of Experiential Learning, where I can connect your students to paid campus internships and immersive experiences with our esteemed faculty and staff, give them access to mentors, build their professional networks, increase their career readiness and transferable skills. That way, once they graduate, they are fully equipped and prepared to land that dream job. I'm pretty sure I would have been received a little bit differently than just Student Employment Services. One other example I'll highlight, and then I'll open it up for conversation. This is a big one for me. Federal work study. What does that mean? What does it mean? I think everybody has a different perception of what it is. I think from a student standpoint, okay, I got federal work study. Does that mean I can study while I work? Maybe. Does that mean I get to work on my studying skills? Maybe. What does it mean to staff and faculty? I think a savvy faculty member would look at it as, I get an opportunity to bring on a sharp, bright, enthusiastic student that's going to help me reach my departmental goals. And let's be honest, it's going to be less of a hit on my budget. I think that's how savvy people, faculty view it. Others, not so sure. But I can tell you this. I can tell you I've been working with students for over 10 years, and this is just not a one-off. I've heard this a lot throughout my education in higher ed. There's a perception that federal work study is not good. It's if you have federal work study, you're not as qualified or talented as other students that do not have federal work study. Now, all of us know that is patently not true, false. It's just incorrect. But there is that stigma out there, and I know this for a fact. I've had students that have been awarded federal work study and have declined it. I have students that have federal work study and they opt not to use it because they don't want that stigma attached to them. So the circle back around, I guess to start off this conversation is, again, what we call things matters. There's these misconceptions out there that student employment is a student working 5 hours a week, passing out towels at the gym, and that's it. So what can we do as higher education leaders to change the vernacular, change the perception of these types of issues, federal work study and student employment? I'll go ahead and open it up.
So Nick, if you guys don't mind, I'd love to start with that, because that's a buzzword for me and sort of a sensitive word for me, because I was that kid. Like, I was that 4-year recipient of work study, and I had no idea what it was. I didn't know, right? First generation kid needs money to work, like needs money. Credit doesn't pay the bills, right? And so when we think about all of these assumptions in our head that we on the call who are now in positions of authority and influence, if that sticks in your mind as, oh, that Marianna Savoca was a work study kid, that's going to color the way that we interact with that student. That's going to influence the type of responsibilities we give to that student. And to think additionally about even just calling a student work study. So like that would be, oh, Marianna, low income kid right here, like poof, there's my label. Like, yeah. So we have actually eliminated the term work study from job descriptions here for that very reason. And the culture is definitely changing. We have a ways to go, guys, but for everybody on the call, just to think about that for a minute, and Nick's point about how work study students are no less valuable than any other student, right? Like, we need to give all of those students not the option to study, right? We need to give students with financial aid the opportunities to develop skills, just like we would give students who don't receive financial aid. I could talk all day, so I'll stop and let my other panelists join.
And I'll just jump in here. Like you, Marianna, I'm a first generation college student. So I didn't even understand. Someone said, are you an undergraduate or a graduate? And I didn't understand the difference. So I was very, very green on my campus. And I agree with you. When you are a work study student, there is a bit of a label there. So what we've done in our department, we call them a departmental intern. And so when we get into the nitty gritty of hiring a student, we'll look into whether they're, work study eligible and those types of things. But everybody can apply. It's a departmental intern. And so in that way, it's open to everyone. More often than not, we do pick a work study student because in my college, most of my students are low income, first generation minority students. So it works out. But in my view, you're not a work study student, you're a departmental intern. And that's where we start the conversation.
Yeah, those are great points. The only other thing I would add is that I think it's on the onus of the departments that are hiring students that have federal work study funding to create meaningful learning experiences. In the back of our minds, we may have misconceptions as both of you have shared about what is a student with federal work study funding is all about. But the reality is that also comes with, I guess, stigma of what types of roles they're doing. I think in the past, You'd have a student that had work study funding that may be staffing the front desk of an office, the rec center, or what have you. And there's a lot of downtime. And so there's a lot of kind of homework being done while collecting federal work study, as opposed to really kind of building their skill set in meaningful roles on campus. So that's the only other thing I would want to share there related to federal work study students. I think all three of your points are well taken.
And Ian, I just want to add on to that a little bit, because you hit a really interesting point. Our students are very smart, but they're not work ready necessarily, meaning they don't have those soft skills. And I know you all have run into this. A student can run circles around us on their iPhone, but don't know how to get Microsoft Word on their computer. So when we have our departmental intern, we're also teaching those very important smart soft skills that make them employable. I've had students, we're all about the same age, I'm assuming. And when you answered the phone, the one phone in your home, you said, hello, Edelin residents, things like, students don't do that anymore. They don't have to, right? They don't have to. They just answer the phone, yo, what up? And they also know who's on the other line. So they know whether it's their mother or their roommate. But remember back in the day when you did not know who was on the phone, so you answered the phone appropriately. Those are skills that we have to teach students. So those are things that as my departmental intern, we work on, so that when my student goes out into an actual job on somebody else's campus or office building, they're ready to go.
I'd add, I absolutely remember the phone, and we do phone skills here for the obvious reason, but I know there was some chatter in the chat around this kind of negative look at work study, but I'll give you one other thing that we've heard over time, and that is departments who want to do the right thing. The departments hear work study and they think, oh, well, I'll let the students study, right? Like they do it out of the good. And so because student employment sits in a career center at Stony Brook, we are very career minded around that. So so our thinking is, how can we help departments structure that job as high impact, as learning integrated, right? And so that's where sometimes the organizational chart also matters, because the signaling, not just the label, right, but the signaling of where it sits. Is it in a transactional office? And no disrespect, I love our financial aid people. Or is it in a developmental way? And so for all of you on the call, think about, what's the pulse on your campuses around about who thinks about this stuff, and can we be thinking about this stuff?
One other point I'll make, and then Marianna, you brought up a topic that I actually kind of in the back of my mind did want to discuss today. But one of the things that we were trying to do is really push and encourage our faculty and staff to think about it differently. So just posting, federal work study job, how can we ethically call it a paid campus internship? And so what we're trying to do is be very specific. Out of the 8 NACE core competencies, these are the core competencies that this student can expect to learn during this immersive experience. We are dedicating and committing to providing guidance, mentorship, and feedback to the student. I know Marianna is familiar with this, but I'm a big fan of the Iowa Grow, the guided reflection on work. Sitting down and having just conversations with students. What is it that you actually learned here? I think there's a lot of things that you've learned, but maybe you're just not prepared or how to articulate what it is that you've learned. So what we've really been trying to do is just encourage folks that these aren't federal work study jobs. These are valuable, sought after, paid campus internships that are going to make yourself more marketable. And then, by the way, we're going to connect you to our life design team so they can sit down and help you articulate what it is that you've learned. But what you're mentioning, Marianna, is something that I did want to bring up is it's very different, like you said, in every university. There's community colleges, private, public universities. Everybody handles a little bit differently. Sometimes student employment's in the financial aid department. Sometimes it's in career services. Sometimes it might be under academic affairs. So where is the ideal place? Where should it be housed in the pecking order of higher ed?
I wrote a piece years ago called "Blow Up the Organizational Chart." because I don't believe in, I know why you're asking the question, because a lot of people ask that question, but the answer isn't there is a place. The answer is it depends on the culture and context and history and traditions and champions that each of the campuses has. Now, here at Stony Brook, career development is centralized. We have a really strong team, so we serve everyone in every school, freshman to PhD, okay? And why student employment and experiential education dovetail so nicely here is because of the type of school we are, the type of student we have. And so for everybody else, I would be honest, I worry less about the chart and more about the champions who are making the changes on the campus that need to be made.
So I'm in a little different position than both Ian and Marianne, because I'm not in the central experiential learning office. I chair my own department and I co-direct a different department. What I expect from my experiential learning team are the tools that I need to help my students. But I'm the expert in my view. I'm the expert on my students and what they do. For example, my mass communication students recently put together a PSA for the campus called Mask Up or Pack Up, because we have students on campus and they need to wear their masks or they'll be invited nicely to leave. And so our students put together that entire packaging. And for me, the best story behind it is, so my mass comm students produced it, directed it, did the scripting and all that, and all of that under the tutelage. Now, of course, I have mass communications professors who were helping, but also we have a public relations, department, another entity that might use them for something different. We have a media team. So these PSAs have been running in the dorms on our closed circuit TV. It just so happened that our president was invited on CNN to talk about our program because it's been pretty successful. He brought the PSA with him. So now CNN is running our PSA. The president mentions that our students created the PSA. Now I've got the anchor from CNN saying on live television, if that was student driven, please have them look us up in a couple of years. So for me, it's about creating an experience every single time. I know we're in COVID. What can I do to showcase my students' work? And now all the students that work on that, they have something for their portfolio. I hope that they kept the clip from CNN saying, have them look me up when you graduate. I will remind them. But so all that to say, the experiential office certainly give us the tools. But as a chair, I feel that I'm the architect of how I use those tools.
And if I could just jump in, there's a couple things that were mentioned that I don't want to get away from, and as we kind of talk about differentiating ourselves and how we're set up, I'll share a little bit about Drexel. One previous point I wanted to make was regarding the onboarding and training of students, whether that is for a position that is funded through federal work study, or in Drexel's case, a student that's going to go out on a 6-month work experience in industry. And we've talked about our generation versus the current generation and some of those changes. And I think one of the most significant is really the percentage of students that arrive on our campus freshman year that have never had a job. And so have never developed the kind of skills that we're talking about, or we may have once assumed that they all had because we had them. Like many of you, I've been working since the age of 14. So there's a lot of things that I learned from flipping burgers or frying seafood in coastal Maine, where I'm from, and work ethic and being, working with difficult colleagues and all those types of things. So I think it's really important, as departments create great experiences for students, that there's also sort of an onboarding process and an understanding of meeting students where they are and where they are. Maybe I've never had a job. Maybe I've volunteered before. So I didn't want to get away from that point because I think that's really important. And then just to kind of give the audience a little bit of a framework in how all of our, setup, for lack of a better term, are different Drexel's student employment focus is primarily through cooperative education. And while we do have many students that utilize federal work-study funding and being a school of cooperative education, we spend a lot of time preparing students before they go out on their first co-op experience through a course that we call Co-op 101. As you might imagine, it's a credit-bearing course and a requirement for students to go out, but it covers a lot of these kind of contemporary workplace issues and some of the things that we take for granted, in addition to kind of the nuts and bolts of how to use Drexel's system and how to work with employers and how to interview and develop a great resume. And if I may just kind of finish with Drexel's program, students at the university that are enrolled in a 4-year program do 1 6-month work experience in industry, but the vast majority are actually 5-year students by design, not by taking an extra senior year, but 5-year students that complete 3 6-month co-ops during their time there. And those experiences are embedded into the curriculum. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about academic integration at some point during the discussion, but I see that as really kind of one of the assets of the program, is to allow students the opportunity to kind of test drive different positions, different organizations, learn from them, and obviously bring those learnings back to the classroom, because it is built into the curriculum, and enhance the classroom experience as well.
So if I could just sort of respond in a way to the framework that Ian has. And Drexel, if those of you on the call are not familiar, is like A++ role model around co-op. And we're all very jealous of all that your 100 years of co-op experience have done for you and your students. But I want people on the call whose schools are a little bit more like mine, in that we don't have the same number of staff, we don't have the same resources, to let you know that this kind of, in my opinion, this kind of transformation is doable with very few resources and with a small number of people, because it involves re-examining, it involves conversing with people on your campus, whether those are faculty, like Charlisa is talking about in her area, she is that subject matter expertise, or whether it's a staff member in the rec center, or in another department, or food service, or what have you. It involves asking questions around what that work is like, and then prompting the supervisors to think about different ways of envisioning that job, of how that student can contribute at a higher level, which may eventually turn into that credit-bearing internship on campus, right? So they don't have to worry about transportation issues to off-campus site. But I love your model, and I would love to have it. But for those of you on the call who will never have that level of resource, or be 100 years old, and all the wonderful things that come with that, there is so definitely possibilities for us to have like many aspects of these things without worrying about the resource issue.
Yeah, I totally agree, Marianna, and we are often contacted by schools that want to launch a co-op program, and we give them an overview of what Drexel has been doing for 100 years. And I often joke that I'm glad I've inherited, a program that was 97 years old at the time, as opposed to launching one. But a lot of what you said mirrors the comments that I share with a lot of schools, which is, you can start off small. Pick one of your strongest academic programs. Find a faculty champion or two that understands the importance of integrating career development into a student's academic plan of study, and try to find those few employers that truly value your students. And if you can show initial successes through whatever you want to call it, a co-op or something else, and assess that, both from a student and employer perspective, that's how you're going to get the small wins to begin to expand those types of things on your college campuses.
Yeah. One of the things I want to add, and Marianna, you're absolutely right that, you know, it's great and best. If I shouldn't say best. It's great to have internships or opportunities on campus. One of the things that we've been working on is actually, you know, using our community partners to get students off campus. So I kind of have a dual role. I am a faculty member, a chair at Delaware State University, but I'm also on the school board in my local district. And there's a need in my district to diversify our student teachers. We were getting all of our student teachers from I'm from Delaware, so we've only got like 4 or 5 colleges, very small. But we were getting all of our students from one particular college, great college, but we weren't really getting any from Delaware State University, just for diversity. And one of the things we've been talking about is actually giving the Delaware State University students some type of voucher, or even buying, or, you know, a bus service to pick them up in the morning to bring them to our district. So, you know, that's, you know, so if you can work with community partners, another community partner we're working with is the local bar association in Delaware, where, you know, we need more minority attorneys. We just appointed our first African-American Supreme Court justice in the history of Delaware just this year. So that's fantastic, but it's 2020. So we need to diversify our minority bar. And when we've been working with the Chief Justice of the state to help us figure out how we can do that. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to get our local law firms to help us transport, because, you know, I was a first generation student. I did not learn to drive until I was the age of 22 because I didn't have a car. What was the point? So there are plenty of students out there like I was that will need help with the transportation piece. I'm in the state of Delaware. We don't have a lot of public transportation. So how are we going to get those students from my town of Dover to Wilmington, where the jobs are? And so those are, and that's an industry relationship that we're working with to expand the experiential learning. My goal would be to have my students work in our local law, in our on-campus law department, the small law department, get some experience, and then do that internship, that credit-bearing internship with a law firm. But you know, to Marianna's point, how am I going to get them there? And that's where I'm working with our industry partners to help us.
Brilliant. That is so brilliant. And it speaks to what everybody on this call can appreciate, which is your context, right? Your very specific context, your location, some of the priorities in your area, not just for economic development and workforce, but also relationship building with your community partners. We have something similar. We have an academic medical center attached to us, Stony Brook University Medicine, right? We're the tertiary care hospital in our county, and it's physically across the street from our main campus. And that hospital is an amazing source of experiences for our students, work, study, and otherwise. It's been curtailed a bit, honestly, in COVID, but this is an amazing way for us to leverage the assets that we have on our campus. And that's another thing I talk to people a lot about, is when you're thinking about this, and Ian, I love your pilot model. And, you know, if you take Ian's pilot model and Charlisa's context model, you can find magic on your campus, and you can make really cool things happen. And I would say the little phrase that we have here, which might sound a little bit New York to some of you, is, you know, if Charlisa's doing something amazing and I tell Ian's like, how can I get some of that, right? Like, it's this way of making it work and then showing other people it's possible for them too, so.
Yeah, you know, I think Charlise touched on this a little bit, but I think it was just a great segment into talking about COVID-19. You know, last spring, March hits, everything is going along peachy, and then boom. I know everybody had different, you know, challenges within their universities. You know, a lot of them were some financial challenges. What do we do with our student workers? What do we do with our federal work study student? You know, how do we move forward? But so we've been dealing with it now for what, 6-7 months. So we finished out the spring, the summer term, and now halfway through the fall semester. So I think this would be a good time to reflect on what impact COVID-19 had. It was challenging. We all know that. But what have we learned from that experience that we can incorporate into our departments and in our industry moving forward?
I'll start. I think, first of all, the first thing we did, which was it actually COVID ended up being a blessing in disguise for us, because again, I have a lot of mass comm students, and we did a virtual graduation, the first ever. And we needed a lot of hands on deck to make that happen. Even just producing the slides for each graduate, I don't know, it was 700 of them. So every one of my departmental interns, their job suddenly turned into becoming a graduation producer. And for some of them, that was way outside of their comfort zone, because if you're a print journalism student, you weren't expecting to produce an event, but that's what you did. So that ended up being a really great experience for all the students. That was a pivot, and that's what everybody did. And some of them, to your point earlier, Nick, some of them learned that, hey, maybe I really do want to be a producer. What I was doing before, I didn't really like. So I think for us, that is the big thing. The second piece is what we've learned now, is we've done a lot better job of working on some soft skills. I've had to work with some students on some soft skills on how do you become a good remote worker. And that's a skill that I hadn't worked with them on. So that's something that we're working with. And internships are not as plentiful, but I do know that we've done some soft skill work, and the students are ready when the jobs come back.
Right.
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, I think the two words that I've really had to embrace are flexibility and understanding. And what I mean by that is, if I can give you a little bit of context, when the pandemic hit and we went virtual, if you will, it was about 2 weeks before the end of our fall-winter cycle, and obviously 2 weeks prior to the beginning of our spring-summer cycle. And as you can imagine, it was an extremely turbulent time for our students, for our office, and not the least of which our employer partners. So flexibility in the sense that we really began to adapt practices that we had essentially said no to, and one of the biggest ones was virtual co-ops. It had been the contention of Steinbright even well before I joined the team that a co-op is a learning experience, and while students make meaningful contributions to the organization, they need that mentorship. They need their supervisor close by. They need to be able to go to someone's office or ask them for coffee or out to lunch and expand their network in sort of, very organic ways as we all have done. But the pandemic provided us an opportunity to truly rethink that. And we really had no choice, right? Virtual co-ops went on the table immediately. And then it became, how can we be flexible with our employer partners in terms of start dates, giving them time to adapt to their own new work reality, have them learn how to virtually onboard students. And then for us to help students do all those things virtually that they used to do organically. How do you invite someone to virtual coffee or lunch? How do I pick this person's brain? How do we go about doing that? And then lastly, on flexibility, I would just say that Drexel's co-op program is kind of like this well-oiled machine. And I won't go into all the details, but what I will say is that throughout an academic year, you're essentially trying to pair 6,000 students with 1,500 employers. And so it has to be a well-oiled machine. But we did have to exercise flexibility with both students and employers that we hadn't in the past. For example, if you're an employer who rescinded a job offer at the 11th hour, that may impact your ability to participate in the co-op program in the future. On the flip side, with the student, if you accepted a job offer and then went and took another one or whatever the case may be, that would also impact your ability to participate in the co-op program. Both those things had to go out the window. I mean, there were financial implications to organizations that there was nothing that they could do. And for students that were on co-op or about to go on co-op that were still concerned about their safety due to COVID-19, some of these co-ops were essential worker co-ops. We allowed them to say, I'm not going to do that. And so flexibility and understanding are probably the two biggest takeaways that I would say related to COVID-19. At least.
And so just a quick follow-up to that. So do you foresee in the future, hypothetically, let's just pretend everything goes quote unquote back to normal and everybody's allowed to start meeting with people again and people feel comfortable with it. Do you think a certain percentage of your remote co-ops will remain that way?
Yeah, I mean, as I, you know, my staff is tired of hearing me say this, but it's probably new to the audience. But I don't think we put the genie back in the bottle here as it relates to virtual work. I mean, for decades, many of us have been told that there's absolutely no way that you can complete your job remotely for any number of reasons that employers have provided. Just as Steinbright has said, there's no way we'll ever be able to do virtual co-ops for all the reasons that I cited. Well, guess what? We've been able to do it, and we've been able to do it effectively. And I think it's had organizations. We've seen some of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley having their workers remain remotely indefinitely. I would say the same will be true for cooperative education. At least while I'm at the helm, I don't see us in a post-pandemic world going back to virtual co-ops. Because the other thing that happens as a benefit is I could be working with a multinational organization with sites, not only all over the U.S. but all over the world. If those are opportunities that virtually may not have been available without the assistance of Zoom and other things. So the answer is no. I don't see us going back to quote unquote normal.
Right.
I'll add just now, taking off the Stony Brook hat for a moment and putting on my hat as president of the National Society for Experiential Education. We have been amazed by the interest in online experiential education. So we have, that's a feature of our Experiential Education Academy. People all over the globe literally are clamoring for help me learn how to do this. And so I agree with the adaptability and the grace and the opportunity. And I feel good that we've weathered a really tough storm. I worry about all the people, students, but also our community partners whose internet access isn't reliable, whose family life is so challenging that not being in school is actually more stress for those individuals than being in the supportive environment of school for many of our students. But I absolutely see all forces, educators, faculty, staff, students, we're all trying to figure out, wait a minute, we've struggled through this and
Right.
Let us figure out how to take the silver linings from what we now have access to, and how can we make sure that going forward, when we have time, not just to react, but when we have time to thoughtfully present a new plan with opportunities like you described, both of you, that's where it's going to get real exciting. And I know, Ian, you said it this way. I know you didn't mean it this way, but I want to call it out for everybody. I don't think any of us want to go back to what was. Like, I think we want to be back to humanity for sure. But I think we're all at the precipice of this wonderful place where we have a real reason to be different. And
Right.
we have a real reason to give people a chance to let go of something they might have been clinging to for reasons other than fear or unknown or what have you. And so I actually see a lot of great potential just based on what my experience has been with the National Society for Experiential Education, not just Stony Brook.
Yeah, I would agree. I think my college actually had been on the precipice of becoming more digital for everyone. So luckily, before the pandemic, we started handing out students, we became an Apple school. We started handing out students iPads or MacBook Pros. So our freshmen and sophomores already had the devices. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to expedite and get a device in the hands of our juniors and seniors, because the goal it had been a 4-year plan that then became a 2-year plan. With that foresight, and we have really been able to do some really innovative things. Our music students use a software called Collabra. I'm not a musician, so but they use a software called Collabra. So they may be across the country, but they're able to collaborate musically, because music is all about timing. So you can't have the slow internet. They're able to do that, and our conducting students are able to conduct. So so these are softwares that we didn't even know, at least I didn't know existed, that we've been able to utilize. We have an art gallery on campus that put everything online. So now we have a digital art gallery that before you had to walk into the art gallery, and probably the only people who knew about it were people at Delaware State University. Now it's global. Our students' artwork is global. And even with our law studies students, where transportation has always been an issue, we're still working on that. Where transportation had been an issue, now they can connect. So I think that we've been able to, in our school, we had the resources to be able to use technology to help us connect. And quite frankly, it made everybody raise the bar. Whether, because, and I know we've all dealt with this. We all have faculty members that are like, well, I don't want to use those fancy new computers. I'm fine. Everybody had to, learn how to use those. Even students, you'd be surprised. Students love their iPhones, but they don't like a MacBook Pro. I'm like, but it's made by the same company, right? You know that. And, but so by raising the bar for everyone, I think that when we, like you said, when we quote unquote get back to normal, I think we're going to see a different level, a different skill level that we'll be able to scale even higher. So like all of you, I would love to get back to humanity. I'm an extrovert, if you couldn't tell, and I like people, and I miss my people. But I do think that when we get back to some sense of normalcy, it's going to be even better.
I appreciate everybody's comments, and I agree 100% with everybody, with what everybody is saying. I think it's important that we also take a look. So we talk about the benefits and the silver linings and things, the positive things that have come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think it's also important to focus on the civil unrest that's going on in this country right now, and how, in particularly COVID-19, I think even put a bigger microscope microscope on just the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that we have. So we're talking about these students, but what about, how do the students perceive this? What about those students? And Char, you made a good point that your university is passing out iPads and things like that. That's perfect. I mean, that's great. But what about those students that do not have access to that? What about those students that do not have access to Wi-Fi? We have students that utilize computers at the library, but the library is closed now. We have our student jobs and our internships. We do our best to transition them to a remote capacity during that time. But what if they can't be completed? What if it's a job that's not possible to do remotely? Now, what do we do with that student? Now they don't have money coming in. So what do we do with them? Take it a step further. What about those students that do have laptops and they're working from home? And I think Marianna or Char, I think, mentioned it. They have difficult home situations. They have kids running around. They don't feel comfortable about showing people, the background of their house, and it makes them feel a certain way because they don't want people to see, this is where I'm lit. So it's a tough question. I'm certainly not going to propose that I have all the answers, but I think it's certainly warranted for discussion. What could we do? What do we actually have the capacity and the power to do to start changing things and moving the bar and to true equality among all of our students?
So I'll just add something briefly. We have to keep front of mind those people who don't enjoy what we enjoy, who don't have what we have, who don't know what we know. And while I believe in my heart that this is an institutional effort, that doesn't mean we should sit back and say somebody else at my school do that, right? And I feel very, very, very proud of Stony Brook University, because as an institution, we are all thinking about these things. And if you work at an institution where maybe they're not as, maybe they're getting there, right? That's okay. You have a voice. You have the power in meetings with people, in memos, during planning, to remind people at the decision makers table around these issues that you know your students are experiencing. And so truly, like I am very, very grateful. I work for an institution that's on it. And but not everybody is, but don't think that leaves you powerless, right? That's just an opportunity to talk to more people and share the stories of the students who we need to take extra care of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. This kind of reminds me of an anecdotal story. I have a student in the spring semester when everything shut down, and she had a device from our college, but to your point, Nick, she did not have internet access. And then to make matters worse, a family member destroyed the device. So now she has no device. All of our students are required to do an internship. So not quite as extensive as a co-op, but they're required to do an internship. So she's not able to complete her internship. She does not have the device. Now what? Now what do we do? What I was able to do with the student, literally by phone, was give her a few assignments that we needed to get done departmentally. So she became our departmental intern, and there were things that she was able to do through her phone to meet the requirement. At the end of the day, we have to meet the students where they are. Bottom line, at the end of the day, we have to meet them where they are. And if the only way they can communicate with you is by cell phone, by mail, although they're not good with mail because they don't know the whole stamp thing, but however it is that they can communicate with you, you have to meet them where they are. And to your point, Marianna, I would say my college is very astute about our students need to be here 4 to 5 years, and they need to be employable. So it starts with the outreach office, and everybody on campus has to be responsible to say, we want to make sure when you leave here and you have that DSU hornet on your diploma, you're employable. So it really does take a group effort. And so for some of you who don't have that camaraderie yet, I think that's where I would start.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think an obvious place, I'm just kind of honing it back into the actual, student employment and experiential learning topic, because obviously this is a massive topic that we could sit here for hours to talk about. But I think a key here is it's going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation is federal work study. Because I think a lot of times what we see is our first generation or limited income students are in fact those folks that have the federal work study award. So I think it comes down to, really adding value to those experiences. What can we do? And it's not just us as leaders of, career services or like Char, you're a faculty member. That's where it needs to start clicking.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I would like to, yes, endorse, but also add something.
Sure.
So on all of the campuses, let's remember who knows something about supervision, who knows something about student development, and who doesn't. And that's where opportunity exists, everybody. So Nick referenced the Iowa Grow program, which is a reflection prompt for student employees. I would recommend everybody look at it. You can join with them. So we have Stony Brook Grow, it's allowed. But why that's important is because not every supervisor of a student employee on my campus has a same level of education, right, that I do. And when you think about even the faculty who are supervising students in their labs or supervising students in another form, like not everybody has the same level of knowledge of A, supervision, B, student development, C, virtual work, And so for your campuses and for the folks on the call, I think it's on us, right? It's our obligation to provide the resources, access, training, coaching, supporting, to make that all happen. Because if we are truly interested in thinking about that work as a learning experience, there's got to be reflection in that. There's got to be critical reflection in that. It's not just think about it. And we can help people learn how to do that.
Yeah, we
Marianna,
also, go ahead, Char.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, excellent point. The best departmental intern supervisor in my department is my administrative assistant.
Yeah.
She loves the students. She wants to train them. She gets a lot of help. But she's the best trainer of us all. And she's also great in fishing out other opportunities for the student. And so to your point, my greatest supervisor is our administrative assistant, and and the students love her. And so, and again, and which I said before, it's everybody has to buy in. It has to be important to everyone. And when that happens, you have a really robust program.
Yeah. I think in regards to the diversity and equity and inclusion, I think the thought that comes to my mind is, and it's kind of piggybacks off what Marianna said, is empathy. We all listen. None of us would be here on this call right now. None of us would be employed in the jobs that we have without students. So I think we need to keep that in mind with every decision that we make, especially as you move up in your career and you have more power to change things and influence things. I think that's the key, empathy. It just make sure that the priority is the students, because without them, none of us are here, at least not in this capacity.
Right. Yeah. And just, and it's always student centered. And I've learned over my years of dealing with students, it changes over time. There was a time, and actually, Nick, this is when you and I were working together at another college. One of my biggest issues was student dress, the way that, the way they came to the office. I don't have that much of an issue anymore. I think the styles have changed and people are a little bit more covered up. So now I'm dealing with appropriate vocabulary. So, and so you're right. You always have to stay student centered. You always have to, kind of put yourselves in their shoes and where they're coming from. I think just going back to COVID, I think a big issue we're going to be dealing with when we start seeing kids again is they've been isolated for a long time. So I'm curious as to what the communication skills are going to be like when we all come back together. I think that's going to be, I think that's just something I've been thinking about. I don't, obviously when we see each other, we'll see what happens, but I think communication skills will have changed, and we're going to have to change with that as well.
Char, you're not allowed to give hugs. COVID, you have to social distance. I know how you are. You're going to see your students and get over here.
I want to hug them all. But
I know. You can't do that. You can't do that. No, I remember that specifically. We actually took a group of your students to the mall. Remember, yes. we got them suits and so they could interview. That was one of the highlights of my career. That was so much fun. They were so excited and they were so grateful.
Yes.
Man, that feels good. Whenever you know that you're helping somebody and they actually genuinely appreciate it. I think it probably does more for us than them in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. And just so you know, I keep in touch with all those students because I'm a hugger, and many of them have used those suits for various interviews. And they so yeah, and that was important because we recognized the students were coming from a place that they really didn't know what was appropriate. So so we helped change that for them, and it was a huge issue. Again, styles have changed, so I do think I don't have that much of an issue. Just and Nick and I had a conversation once about tattoos, and I just say, tattoos are fine. I have teenagers. I know the students want them, but please don't put them on your face.
Hey, that norm might change too.
That norm may change as well.
Right.
I think we've all had to adapt to that. I initially had a harder time with dress and nose rings and tattoos and things like that in the workplace. But, you also understand that society's changing. I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm older and you're a bit set in your ways about things. But I think it's super important to embrace the modern workplace and the fact that people will be tattooed and wearing nose rings and will wear their hair as they wish. And these are all part of our diversity and things that we need to embrace as opposed to try to change to fit into some old mold, if you will.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed. I want to propose this. So to each of our panelists here today, what is one word or phrase or image that you would use to describe the future of experiential learning or student development or student employment?
I'm going to go first. I'm going to share my screen and I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to show it. You guys can snap it, but that is my vision. And now
I love it.
I'll stop sharing so the rest of you guys have time.
That's great. Definitely seen that before, Marianna. I think I just saw it on a LinkedIn post not too long ago. How about you, Shar?
My one word is intersectionality. I was thinking of a Venn diagram, if you will. I was thinking of a Venn diagram, and we put, the academic piece and the experiential learning piece, and that little piece in the middle that overlaps. Intersectionality. I think that we need to think about both academics and experiential learning as one. So if I could make a Venn diagram, that's what it would look like.
Yeah, and if I had to sum it up in one word, I would probably say hybrid, and for a couple reasons. One, I think student employment will have a virtual aspect to it. So that's one use of the term hybrid, is that there may be virtual and there may be some face-to-face meetings or things of that nature that are part of the experience. And then hybrid in the sense, and it goes back to what Shar was saying about, the student experience, in my mind, is really about the intersection and integration of kind of academic learning and career learning. And I think that is a big part of the future of student work and student education.
And before I give my answer, I will just in complete transparency, I did let the panelists know I was going to ask that question. So that was the only one that was scripted. I know I said at the beginning it was going to be, everything else has just been organic, but I did let them know I was going to ask this question. So I think my phrase, would be high impact practice. I think that would be the thing that kind of resonates the most with me. I want to change the narrative. I want to change the perception. I want folks to see student employment, federal work study, these paid campus internships for what they really are. And they are an important component of career readiness. And I think, I certainly don't have studies in front of me right now, but I think it's, general knowledge that the folks that have these experiences, that get connected to the mentors and build those, professional networks, generally are more successful in finding those positions that they crave. So I want to take a second to thank our guests for being here. We're 12:59, so we're wrapping up right on time. Excellent conversation. For the folks, if we didn't get to answer your questions, at least for me personally, and I'm sure the other folks won't mind, reach out to us directly on LinkedIn.
Please do.
I'd be happy to answer any questions. And remember that there is only one certain vision for the future, and that's the one that you make. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.